we'll make a start if that's okay.
Yeah, no, that's
I've just got my cheat sheet here
right.
with questions and things.
Okay.
But if anyone's got any questions or just wants to chip in throughout the talk, just chip in.
Yeah, just do, because that, that's great.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And just for the video as well.
Yes.
Thank you very much for coming. Sue Johnson is a writer, a poet, a novelist, musician, playwright.
Not doing so much music now, but definitely playwriting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're from Worcestershire? Or
No.
Live in Worcestershire?
Live in Worcestershire. I'm from Kent originally.
Oh, right.
Yeah, long time ago. So, but I've been in Worcestershire more of my life than I was in Kent. So
Yeah.
Just how it works, really.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
How would you describe your writing generally to someone who you've just met? And you say you're a writer. How would you describe?
Compulsive. It's just something that I have to do, irrespective of how well I think that project might do.
Yeah.
If it's an idea that is burning to get out, then I just have to do it, because I'm not going to be happy until it's done, really.
Right.
I know it horrifies some people when I do talks for men's probers and things, that they are very focused on how much money are we going to make from this, whatever.
Yeah.
And when I'm saying, irrespective of that, I need to do it for my creative outlet.
Just in your bones, you're just
yes,
a writer.
it's just there.
Yeah.
I've written ever since I could write, so I think I could write before I went to school. So I spent a lot of time, when the weather was nice, outside with my little desk and writing stories and drawing pictures and making a weekly newspaper that I used to sell to the other kids for
brilliant.
an old-fashioned threepenny bit, if you remember those. And so there was only ever one copy, because it was all held together with sort of sellotape and bits of string and everything. And so it taught me the value of a cliffhanger ending, because the one week that I didn't put a cliffhanger on a story was the week that a couple of people said, "Oh, we'll wait till next week when you start another story." And my dad, who was in banking at the time, said, "What did you do this time that was different?" So I said, "Oh, I didn't have a cliffhanger." And he said, "Well, there's your answer." So, which was good.
That's the thing about doing it compulsively, isn't it? You can learn faster.
Yes.
Whereas if you're George R.R. Martin and you take 10 years to write your next book, you're not going to learn quite as quickly. No,
but then I suppose you don't know what else he was going on and doing.
To be fair, I think he's had a lot on.
Do any of you remember that lesson at school when the teacher goes round and says, "So-and-so, what do you want to be when you grow up?" Yes? Yeah. What did you say, Joe?
It wasn't the teacher, it was one of my neighbours on the path from my mother was taking something. And I remember saying to her, "I think it's something I'm going to do. It's going to involve sitting down and writing."
Oh!
They ignored the writing bit. Joe wants to have a job sitting down.
Oh dear. Oh, that's funny.
So did you, so you've always written, did you go away from it for a while and come back?
Yes.
As lots of kids do.
Yes, because I think when I was at school, when I was about 7, we had a teacher, and every week or so she would give us a card that had a picture on it, and she would say, write about the picture, and I would look at whatever picture and I'd be away with a story, creating something about 3 miles long, and the children who weren't so able could just describe the picture, like, you know, there's a dog in the picture and the little boy is wearing a blue jacket and things like that. Whereas I would be off on this massive long story, and that particular teacher would leave me and she'd say, we're going off to do something else now. You can stay there if you want to. And it was great. And I mean, chances of doing that now. And then it was the teacher the following year when I was about 8 or 9. And we had that lesson and she said, what do you want to do? And I said, when I grow up, I want to write stories and draw pictures. And I can picture the look on her face now. She went a dull brick red colour and she said, I don't think that's a proper job, do you, dear? She said, you better write about being a nurse. And the reason she said write about being a nurse was because my mum's sister worked for the NHS. She worked in Orpington Hospital. I was born in Orpington in Kent. And Orpington Hospital was a collection of Nissen huts, and it was funded by the Canadian government in World War I. And my aunt worked there, and I used to go into work with her on a Saturday morning. We all lived in a big house. So there was my great-gran, mum and dad, gran and granddad at one point, and this aunt. And so I'd go into work with Auntie. And I mean, again, you know, you couldn't imagine that now, really, you know, a kid being let loose in a hospital.
Yeah.
And so I used to go around all the wards with Auntie, taking these letters round, meeting all the nurses.
Brilliant.
And so I think that was why this teacher thought that I could write about being a nurse. But I viewed that as my first commissioned piece of work, really. And it was put on the wall at open day, and everybody was saying, oh, you'll make a lovely nurse. And I was thinking, no, I don't want to do that. I really don't want to do that. So when I left school, I didn't really like school because I always felt like I never fitted, really. A little bit square peg in a round hole kind of thing. I did find, depending which teacher you spoke to, I was either outstandingly bright or a bit dim. So if you got the maths teacher, it was a bit, you know, she's not very good. If it was English, history, languages, then, you know, the marks were well up in the 90s kind of thing. So it was a complete split. And I didn't want to stay on at school for A-levels. I did do them later. And my dad, who by then was working for Rank Film and Leisure, we used to say he was the man in the leopard skin, you know, banging the gong.
Banging the big.
Yeah.
I miss those films. I miss seeing the big gong.
So we used to say that was our dad. And so he'd gone on a conference somewhere and met a guy who was the training officer for Times newspapers. And it turned out they had a training school for business and secretarial girls. And so you had to apply and get through 2 interviews. And then you were trained with shorthand typing, office practice, bookkeeping, you know, all the other gubbins, and you were guaranteed a job, which is how I started off.
Brilliant.
So it gave me the ability to type.
Yeah.
Much to Bob over there's annoyance. I can touch type and talk to him at the same time.
Oh, really?
Yes, but it's very useful. So I've never had to pay anybody to type manuscripts for me or anything like that. You know, there's all that kind of at the back of it.
Yeah.
But I did a lot of other creative work in my 20s. So my last proper job, as my mum used to call it, was working for Halford's head office in Redditch as a training administrator.
All right.
And so it was training all the sales assistants, managers, different things. And we made training films. And I acted in one of them as a shoplifter. It's great fun. So then when my children were growing up, I ran a small business making patchwork, which actually is very much like putting a novel together. You know, you're putting the bits together.
Yeah.
So, you know, you just kind of go on from there, really. Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it, how much things have changed in terms of like what could be possible now for kids to do. So I grew up wanting to be a filmmaker, but I was in a little village in the middle of North Wales.
Oh.
And in the 90s, that's impossible. You just can't do it.
No.
But now, with your phone, you can make a film, you can pop it online, you can publish it instantly, and you can write a novel, get it out there immediately, and just be what you want, which is lovely.
And you can run that alongside other jobs and things. So you don't actually necessarily have to have just the one career where you're stuck in the same place all the time.
You don't have to fly to Hollywood and starve on a bench somewhere. No. You can do it at home and, you know.
Starve at home.
Just starve at home.
Cut out the middle person. But yes, you can, you know, there's huge scope. And I mean, where you can write things and submit them to, say, the BBC, or you could create your own play and go somewhere like the Edinburgh Fringe. And because I think there was a man, was it last year? And he'd gone up there with, I think it was a comedy show, and he only got one person in the audience, and they said, do you want to sort of run it, or, you know, should we go to the pub? And he said, no, he said, I've come here to do this. So he said, I'm going to do it. And I think because the helpers with the event were laughing, he, you know, it went viral.
Oh, brilliant.
And somebody sort of recorded his event and somebody laughing. And he's away now. And
that's amazing.
So it's an open field, really.
Yeah, I find it very easy to get sucked into the doom and gloom of technology, where it's like surveillance and, you know, capitalism run amok and all of that. But it's really opened everything up for creative people to just do what they like and connect with who they want. And, you know, there's no gatekeepers anymore.
No. And I think the big changer really was, although it was negative in so many ways, was the pandemic, because a lot of things went on to Zoom, which I will be honest, I was quite resistant to start with, but I bought a little gizmo for my computer, and it's I've more than had my money's worth from it, because the number of events I've been able to access that have been free.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's been great.
A lot of authors we've had in here have said the pandemic was very much a changing point for them as well, where they could, you know, concentrate a bit. Obviously, horrendous, awful time. But that's such a sort of pivot point for so many creative people.
And I think it was a changing point, I think, for a lot of people as well. And just a chance to review perhaps how you wrote and your writing process and various other things like that, really.
I see a lot of people who lost their jobs in that time and decided, I'll just give writing a go. I'll have a go at whatever I actually love, because you know, this big horrible tragedy has shown me that it's not really worth just, you know.
I think you just sort of think, actually, if you don't, more or less, if you don't do it now, when are you going to? And you don't keep putting things off, because, and I think it is scary. I mean, particularly when you come to submit work somewhere and you're about to sort of press the button and you just sort of think, oh, I can remember a friend of mine saying, you know, for goodness sake, if you're not going to do it, I'm going to. And so it's just getting on and just going for it. And I've actually had my best breakthroughs really with competitions.
Oh yeah.
So competitions, in my view, are the way to go, because it gets you to try something you might not have tried before. And very often for me, it's been with something that either somebody has said, no, don't do that. It's very much a factor with me. If somebody tells me not to do something, I'm likely to sort of do exactly what I'm told not to do. And I used to have an elderly lady in one of my writing groups, and she was well into her 80s. And I always used to say to her, now, Brenda, you mustn't do whatever. And when she came back the next month, she'd very gleefully say, well, I didn't do what you told me to do. And I just think, great, because I didn't want you to. It was like reverse psychology. So it worked. It was really good. But,
that's one of the things I love about, I'm reading your writing success book at the moment, which, if you've not read it, is a brilliant introduction to how to use poetry to generate ideas for stories, and just in itself, isn't it?
That's right.
And I was shocked at how many kinds of poetry there are, as someone who doesn't read poetry. I love that the book has a sort of a history of poetry throughout it.
Yes.
Of all the different forms, and it's inspiring to see that you can kind of do what you like, and in some respects, and then you have all of these other forms. There was one, I can't remember what it was. Was it the Diamante?
Yes,
which is brilliant,
yes.
Which has a very strict set of rules, and if you have a go, then you've got something that looks and sounds and is a poem.
Yes.
And because you're restricted, it's less scary.
Yes.
Because I find writing is very uniquely.
Like that, but I find them more scary.
Yes. It's funny actually. People respond differently, but I very much see poems as little stories or short films. So I think, as we were saying earlier, it's about using the senses. So if you can actually use that as a complete immersion into something, it's a way forward. I think sometimes if you're the sort of person that likes having rules to follow, and sometimes it can make life easier because you're told you can only use this many words, or you've got to do it in this kind of format. You've got to create a poem in X number of words, or
you see a lot of that with filmmaking, especially with indie filmmakers where they're doing it themselves. They make what they can with what they've been given.
Yes.
And when you've got your big Hollywood blockbusters with all the money in the world, they struggle to make a film, and will take years over it. But you work with what you've got. You can be more creative because the restraints kind of spur you on in a way.
And I think that's it. And it's sometimes time constraint, word constraint, or perhaps just going with what you can see, hear, smell in a particular space where you are, then that can be a good sort of focus point. I think if you are stuck with, say, working on a character, because you were saying with your novel, if you switch a short section to second person and think about a person maybe walking up a road. So you're saying you are walking up a road.
Oh, okay.
You notice this. You hear so and so. You can smell, say, the scent of lilac. It makes your nose itch. You keep walking. There's a stone in your right shoe.
Yeah.
And that just gives you a little bit of a picture of
Yeah,
that.
definitely.
Oh, bless you. That gives you a little bit of a picture of where the character is, what's around them, and it just focuses a little bit more on how things are.
You have to have been to somewhere to watch about it.
No,
Oh, good.
no, I don't think so, because
The reason I ask is that I've just read Christian Hanna's The Great Alone, which is about Alaska, and her descriptions are phenomenal.
yeah,
And I thought she's got to spend a lot of time in Alaska. And I thought, who would spend a lot of time in Alaska? So, I didn't know whether she had spent time there or whether she looked up pictures on the net. Or
I don't know, because for me, I would want to know what the place smelt like. You could probably get colours and sounds and those sorts of things off a good film, probably. It depends. I mean, you could probably interview a lot of people and ask them what their experience was like. What did they most remember about being there? What did they like about it? What made them feel uncomfortable, maybe? Did the place make you feel slightly edgy?
just describe smell.
Yeah.
Smell or something.
Yeah.
My book is set in Manhattan, and I've never been to New York at all. So I got on YouTube, and people used the little GoPro cameras.
Yes,
So I watched hours and hours of videos of people with a GoPro on, just doing their daily commute on a scooter. And you just get to see the streets and go through and see everything, and it's not edited, it's not filmed to tell you a narrative or anything. It's just sort of traveling through, and I found that really helpful. But you don't get that entire other side of touch and taste and smell.
No, that's it. And it's the texture of the air, and what does that feel like on your skin?
Yeah.
And what does the air smell like? I mean, for instance, if you went past, if that scooter is going past coffee shops or something like that, you could probably hazard a guess, that you would get a rainbow of scent maybe coming from different places. Maybe a sort of movement of colour, if you're going at any sort of speed. So those sorts of things you could build in.
I've read a lot around planning to write novels and that sort of thing, and a lot of people recommend, we were talking about character biographies and that sort of thing earlier, and I do think that's helpful, but often that just turns into a list of all the things that have happened to a character in their life before you start the story. So the idea of writing from their perspective, or writing poetry inspired by where they live or their experience sounds fantastic, and a brilliant way to sort of bring an extra layer of artistry into what could just be a ABC, this happens and this happens and this happens kind of book.
It can become a little bit of a tick box.
Which is what I struggle with.
If you just go through somebody's list. But if you, for instance, think, what were they like as a child? What did they most want then? Has that changed over time, or has that perhaps got more extreme? And I'm thinking particularly about the beginning of a novel called Penmarrick. Did anybody read it? Susan Howard. It was long time ago, back in the 80s, but you got this main character, and he was saying, I was 7 when I first saw my inheritance, and I wanted it, and it was this castle that he thought should belong to him. And I was 21 when I saw this woman, and he said my reaction was the same. You know, I wanted her, and it's this kind of almost compulsive, I'm entitled to,
Right.
which goes right through the character. And I think thinking about what do they most want, what's their greatest fear very often, and actually somewhere in that novel make sure that they confront that. So whether it's a fear of heights, so for instance, if there's somebody that they care about, they might need to go up a structure to
like in Vertigo, which is, you know, one of the greatest films of all time. That's exactly what they do, isn't it? They set up his fear in the first scene, and then in the final scene he's got to confront it.
Same thing. So if you have an incident like that, and you know right the way through that is going to be building towards that. So what's their greatest fear? What is their greatest secret? So there will be something that most people don't know about them. So what wouldn't they want people to know about them? And then also have a point where somebody walks in and says, oh, so-and-so, you know, I didn't realise you were, you know. And have a point where they're going to actually be put on the spot.
That's brilliant.
I've been writing the first draft of a play this last week for a competition, and I've realised I've only got 2 weeks before I need to submit the thing. So, but I've been having great fun actually really putting these characters under as much stress as I can, you know, in the course of a 30-minute play, and actually not letting them off the hook, because I think there's a great tendency that you kind of build something up and then you wimp out from actually going the full what's it. This is Writing Magazine, and I think if I survive till next year, I will have worked for them for 20 years as a home study tutor. So initially, the assignments used to come by post, and I used to have to type the letters, and this was pre-email. It's quite hard to remember that really now. But so pre-email, I was just sending them back in envelopes, and then, you know, you'd repeat the process. And now it's all emailed, and I tutor on about 7 of their programs, which is great fun. But I had one student a lot of years ago, and she would set up the most fantastic thing, and then she'd wimp out at the last minute. And she'd let the characters forgive each other, and I was thinking, no, don't. And she was saying, you know, I'm a Christian and I don't like to sort of upset people. And I said, well, you're not actually. And I said, well, you're not actually upsetting, you know, a proper person, if we want to get technical. But and actually, it might save a lot of upset, you know, in other places. And I think she got the hang in the end, and I was, you know, thank goodness for that.
She just needs to be meaner to them.
Because it can relieve an awful lot of stress, which is great, you know.
And it's always more rewarding when your characters come through it, isn't it?
Oh, yes,
if you think about something like The Shawshank Redemption, which is 95% bleak, awful, horrible things happening, but it's still a feel-good film because that last 5% is just perfect because of all of the bleakness that's come before it. And if you weren't mean to Andy Dufresne, then you wouldn't feel as happy for him afterwards.
No, that's right.
and it wouldn't
Range of
work in the
motion.
same way.
Yes,
I
yeah.
haven't watched it. I haven't read that movie. I should actually read it as well.
Oh yes,
it's good.
do, because
It's good.
it's a very good book. Very,
I mean, I've read Les Mis.
yeah,
All of it.
Yes.
Both volumes. But it's not, I don't know why I picked it up.
no.
Is that
But
one of the things you sort of notice that people struggle with the most? Is they're just not pushing things to the extremes
No,
when it comes
no.
to drama.
I think this is it, and I think sometimes it does get extremely edgy, and I think this is what you want when you've got a reader with your
Yeah.
book. So when you revise your novels, make sure that each chapter starts with something interesting, and make sure that each chapter ends on a kind of cliffhangery thing.
Yeah, to go back to your old newspaper.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, because if you just have them going off to sleep at
Yeah.
night, then there's a great tendency for the reader to think, oh, that's all right, they're okay. And they put the book down, and unless they're really burning to pick it up again,
Yeah.
the chances are it might stay on the pile and, and it'll get forgotten about. I think with my first novel, which is called Fable's Fortune, I did have them going off to sleep at night, and they were settling down, and then a brick got hurled through the window. So, you almost sort of think, yes, you've settled them down. And I can remember a friend reading it at the time, and she said, I was up, she said, another hour until she said I could put it down again. So I said, yeah, I know that feeling with other people's books, but you think, oh, just read another couple of pages, and you're sort of nodding off, and you're coming back again, and
Yeah.
it's that sort of feeling. And
It's amazing how much crossover there is between different formats and things. I used to write comic books, and the trick with comic books they would always say is, so that's your 2 pages there that you're currently on, like that. This panel at the end always has to have some sort of question in it for the reader.
Yes.
Doesn't matter if it's just a tiny one, but if you've resolved everything there, they're just gonna, it's going to be a struggle for them to turn the page and keep going.
Yeah,
and it's the same principle, isn't it? And
it is.
do you find it helpful for your own writing that you've written in so many formats, and you can learn from different ones and draw on different techniques?
Yes, you do. And actually, I'm learning stuff all the time, because one of the sort of things with the playwriting that I've been doing, which has proved extremely valuable, is for each character to have their own word bank.
Oh, okay.
So
brilliant.
by that I mean, if you have, say, 10 common words, so it might be like sleep, toilet, hello, goodbye, sofa, car, very, very ordinary words, and then take 3 characters and think, what word would each character use for those, and make sure that they're different.
Yeah. Brilliant.
So if you're reading a load of dialogue without,
Yeah.
So
which
yeah,
character is
so
Yes.
one person calls it the toilet, one calls it the loo, one calls it the bog,
Yeah,
and then
that's
you've
it.
got a different.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
And
I've
then
never
you
heard
might
that before.
have a fairly old-fashioned person that calls it the lavatory or something like that, or very posh or something like that.
Yeah.
So yes, it's that variation that's important, and so it was something that I didn't particularly think of when I was novel writing or short story writing, but very much when you come to sort of doing podcasts and radio plays particularly, where you haven't got the visual tags.
Oh, so they have to be able to tell quite quickly.
You need
who's speaking.
to know very quickly.
Yeah.
Otherwise it becomes very confusing.
That's a brilliant way to do it in writing as well, without falling into the trap of writing in an accent, which can be which can go too far sometimes.
Yeah, it can. And actually, if you overdo it and you've got too many that so it sounds a bit like, or it looks a bit like a line of tadpoles going across where you've got dropped H's and everything like that.
Oh, of course, yeah.
It's very messy to read, and it holds people up, and therefore you think, well, there's got to be a better way of doing it.
Yeah.
So specific words that relate to that person, catchphrases.
Yeah.
And I think one book, I think it was Weekend in Paris. I can't remember who wrote it, but I think the one of the characters was Australian, and she didn't say that she was going to the loo. She'd say she was going for a whizzer. So you knew it was her.
Yeah.
And it was sort of that right the way through.
Yeah.
And it just became her sort of nickname in the finish.
Oh, right.
By the end of the book. So yeah.
That's really helpful for a helpful thing to think about for fantasy writing as well.
Yes.
Which I'm having a go at. But the idea that different, people from different places will have completely different dialects and words for things. It's very helpful to avoid that kind of writing in a silly voice sort of thing.
Yes.
Yeah. I read Chuck Palahniuk's advice on writing. And one of the things he talks about is try and write something that has a little bit of a cult feel to it.
Yes.
So give your imagined people, even if they're, a real, supposed to be a real community, not Game of Thrones sort of thing. Give them little catchphrases, little shared things that they swap. So Game of Thrones, like winter is coming, that sort of thing.
Yes.
In jokes.
In jokes, yeah, and you don't have to explain everything.
No.
And it sort of gives your characters a sense of community, which makes it easier for the readers to buy into, and then there's something for them to latch onto as well. Like Star Wars is the master of that, isn't it? With
that's right.
All of their little catchphrases and things.
Also, treasured possessions.
Oh yeah.
Because no matter how poor somebody is, they will always have something. It might be a special stone or just something that they've picked up somewhere, or something that they were given that they wouldn't actually part with.
Yeah.
And if they then lost that, how would they feel?
Yeah.
And if they felt somebody had actually taken it, if it was something that they felt maybe gave them some kind of power, or
that's always
something along those lines. Yeah. So think about what people own. When I don't know if you saw or read the book, it was Operation Mincemeat.
Oh, I've heard the story behind it, but I haven't read the book.
And there's a book and there's a film, and it was World War II, and the English were trying to convince the Germans that they weren't going to invade a particular place. And so they hit on this idea, and one of the team behind the idea was Ian Fleming, who wrote the bomb books.
Was it really?
Yes. There were 3 of them. So Ian Fleming was one of them. So they found a tramp who had died of natural causes somewhere, got him out of the mortuary, tidied him up, put him in a naval officer's uniform, with a briefcase strapped to his arm with these supposedly secret papers in that were saying about this invasion that was going to happen somewhere or other. So he was Major somebody Martin, supposedly had come off this destroyer or something and had drowned. And they got him all sort of done up, and Ian Fleming said, he said, let's have a look at his wallet. And they put money in, and he said, no, he said, that's no good. You need what they call wallet litter, the same as if you've got somebody's handbag and you looked in that, you might get a clue as to who that person was, what sort of person they were, and what was going on in their life, possibly. So he said, no, we need a few things in there. So he got photos of 2 different women, his wife and supposedly his mistress.
Right.
A letter from his father saying how disappointed he was in him because he'd gone sort of overdrawn on his mess bill or something,
Right.
in his regiment or whatever, and a letter from this from his wife and one from his mistress that he was carrying around. And so when the Germans saw it, they must have thought, well, he's a bit of a lad. And
Yeah.
they gave him a military burial, with full honours.
Oh, really?
Took the information and promptly did exactly what the English wanted them to do. And they were then able to invade, I think it was somewhere like Greece. Am I right? Thank you. And anyway, but it was this building a story about him.
Just from his possessions.
Yes, and very much, same thing. If you think, what would that person carry around with them? Because unless they had just left home to go for a walk or a run, they would usually have something in their pocket.
Yeah.
Maybe keys that might have something on them. Maybe, if they got a handbag, there'd be something in there, possibly. My mother's handbag always used to be a source of mystery, because whatever somebody, it was a bit like Mary Poppins, because whatever somebody wanted, it was usually in there. Like, if you needed a spoon for your coffee, she'd sort of, be in there somewhere. And she got all sorts of things. And even I think when she and my dad went to a conference somewhere, and he got a dress shirt and he'd left his cufflinks at home, and she said, oh, don't worry, I might have a set. And he said, oh, you've never got some of those in there. Where did you get those? And she said, I think it was out of a cracker last Christmas. But it was amazing. Yeah, and I'm still finding things now, and she's been dead 12 years, Yeah, amazing.
And it is powerful when you can sort of take things away from people. Like one of the most sort of moving scenes I've ever seen in a film is in Rio Bravo, if you've seen that. You know, where Dean Martin's the town drunk, and he's hopeless, and John Wayne does him up, gives him a new suit and everything, and gives him a haircut, makes him look fancy for the first time. Then he walks into this saloon, and immediately the locals just start throwing lots of spit on him and punching him and ruining his nice new outfit and stuff. And it's gone from Dean Martin feeling like, a king again, to just the lowest of the low, and he's the town drunk as always. And it's such a powerful thing to see characters go up and then down, and vice versa.
It's a sort of rags to riches thing, isn't it? And and it's true, and it's and also it's that element of choice, isn't it? So you could carry on going up, and you could take one choice, and it comes to sort of different pathways, and which one are you going to sort of opt for? And sometimes it means giving up something that you think is going to matter. Sometimes maybe you regret doing that. Maybe you don't.
It's always fascinating watching or reading stories where you find a character that you love, and then you're watching them take bad decisions. Because quite often, that's quite rare, because often your heroes are always doing the right thing, and then every choice they get, they do the right thing. So it's interesting when someone will go the wrong way. With things like The Godfather, where you've got a good man who is corrupted, and then you just see him step by step doing things, taking reasonable choices to sort of protect his family, but they take him down a dark path, and by the end he's done.
It's just gone. It is. It's very very interesting, and you see that a lot with people, don't you, in life anyway? And you just think, sometimes an element of encouragement at the right time
Yeah.
can make a huge difference.
You can tell a lot about a person's character as well, because my sister-in-law was a really positive person, and she sort of says, there's nothing I've done I've regretted, but I regret some things that I didn't do.
Yes,
And
yes.
I think that's a sign of a positive person.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's true. And I think for that reason, that's why I'm saying if there's something you want to do or create, then do it, because you don't know. I mean, it might not necessarily hit the mark now, but the fact that you've written it, it might well be ahead of its time.
Yeah. One of my
know.
favourite authors is this fella called Jim Thompson, who's a crime writer, and he died completely penniless and unknown, and his work was sort of discovered 10 years after his death and reprinted and everything, and now he's very successful, even though he's dead. But his work has reached a lot of people, and you just never know, do you? Because you know, there are so many people who have done the same thing, where they've written something and forgotten about it and gone away, and you know, maybe they've not had a happy life, and then their work gets discovered after the fact. You know, and not that it's about success and that sort of thing, but things resonate with people when they find them at different times. Yeah,
and I think sometimes a book or a story can actually save your life in the sense that if you read about a character that overcame something that might be something you're going through at the time yourself, then you can think, well, actually, that's helped me.
Yeah, definitely.
And that then enables you to help others.
Yeah.
And it's very much my mission with writing to take as many people as possible with me, because I've been running workshops at Number 8 Community Arts Centre in Pershore for nearly 20 years now. And I started that having worked for a couple of colleges for a few years, working with people who were mentally ill.
Yeah.
And it was only really when they changed the funding on that I thought actually I could be reaching more people and doing more with setting up on my own. And I'd actually saved 6 months' money, thinking if this goes pear-shaped, I'll leave and I'll get something else. And I'm still there. So,
Brilliant.
And then about 18 months ago, I started doing U3A groups in Evesham. So again, I do those on a voluntary basis. So that is also good. And
do you feel that writing is something that can really help with people's mental health?
Yeah, definitely, because it saved me when I was going through quite a dark patch. When I was early 40s probably, with a marriage breakup and things. And I came to Redditch Library to do poetry, and I met my partner Bob. So we've had 26 years together writing poetry and doing joint collections and all sorts of things. And he's doing his wildlife poetry, selling the next collection for the Wildlife Trust.
Brilliant.
So it all adds, really.
I love that you met in this very building.
I know,
very cool.
I know. So very exciting to come back.
Do you feel that poetry especially is something that can be helpful to people's mental health because of its kind of expressive?
Yeah, and I think
qualities?
the thing is that you can actually write things down really quickly.
Yeah.
And the way that I've often done poetry workshops is that we've combined it with doing some collage and artwork as well.
Brilliant.
So you can have sort of lots of colours and sort of gluing and sticking and just building complete pictures.
Yeah.
And that is very much how I start to put a novel together. usually if I get the urge to start ripping magazines up, then it's a sign that there is something in the offing.
It's really accessible, isn't it? Because it's so short.
Yeah.
Working through the exercises in your book.
Yeah.
And you talk about how even if you just write for 15 minutes a day, that's plenty. That's still worthwhile.
Yes.
Because it can feel a bit sometimes as if if I can't knock out 5,000 words, what's the point?
That book, I know I'm still doing this. Is that book where you're talking about the book about writing?
Oh, the book about writing.
You're talking about your second.
Oh, it's called Writing Success.
Yes, it's on there, and it's got a feather on the cover, like a quill pen. Oh, are you? Yes.
No, because I'm diverging.
No, you're
it's
all
okay,
right.
please.
You're fine.
I am autistic.
No,
it's okay.
Oh, it's all relevant. Yeah, the book there is about synesthesia.
Well, let's ask you some questions. Personal though, and it's not really about writing.
No, that's fine. No, we can do that at the end. That's great. But I think for me, having synesthesia has been a huge bonus. Huge gift. I spent the early part of my life not saying anything about it,
Right.
because my mother used to think it was imagination. Back when I was first at school, I think if you did say too much about that, you were likely to be carted off to the educational psychologist.
Right.
My mum didn't really want that for me, but it did have a huge impact in that we did reading in the morning. So by lunchtime, I was full up on words. And when we went down to the dinner hall, you'd have a line of dinner ladies with, big pots of something, and they'd try and whop something on your plate, and I'd be saying, "I'm not hungry," and they were, "Well, you haven't eaten anything," and I was, "No, I'm not, not hungry," and they were saying, "Well, you must be." "No, I'm not." I was in my 40s before I knew that it was a proper condition, that I wasn't actually sort of, well, it is slightly strange if you try and talk about it to anybody else, but it was normal for me then, and that it actually had a name, because I met an artist friend of mine called Jenny Gunn, who now lives in Leominster. Her birthday is one day after mine, in March, and she said to me when we first met, "Fridays are red, what colour are they to you?" And I said, "They don't have a colour, but," I said, "I can tell you what they taste of." And she said, "I knew it." So it's great because it's somebody that just totally understands, where I'm at. And it's quite rare, but there are 70 different varieties of it.
Really?
And there's sadly a lot of children now being put on medication for it, which makes me quite cross. It's unnecessary, because they think they're ADHD, disruptive, that slightly offbeat imagination.
Yeah.
No, I mean, you just don't need medication for it,
So it's more of a sort of a different experience.
Yeah.
Rather than...
Well, it's your way of looking at the world, which won't be the same as anybody else. And the thing is, we're all different, aren't we?
Yeah.
Which is a good thing. And I think it should be more about celebrating differences.
Definitely.
And not worrying about it, really, and not trying to make everybody conform.
So you have a very different relationship with language than most people.
Yes,
so...
because certainly it would probably inform what I would call my characters.
Yeah.
Which words would sort of go together.
Oh, because the names would have a different
They have a different taste.
Yeah.
They have a different taste. So Martin actually tastes of tinned tomatoes. Yeah,
Brilliant.
which I quite like. Yes. Oh, that's Robert, strawberry jam. But it's not any old strawberry jam. It's the variety that my gran used to make. And my gran died in the early 90s, and she wasn't making jam for a few years before that. So the taste kind of lodges very firmly in your brain.
Yeah.
And it's just there, and it doesn't change over time.
Does that give you a different experience of, sorry if this is too personal,
No.
but you know, the old, what they call it, a Proustian moment, where you smell a particular smell of bread and then you're transported back to your childhood?
Oh, yes.
So do you have
Yes.
sort of a more intense version of that?
Yes.
Where, because I imagine you're tasting things all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
And especially if they're linked to your childhood, so you're kind of drawn back through your life more often, say,
Yes.
than I would be.
Yeah, very often. And actually, I do have a very good memory.
Yeah.
Going, way back to, I think my earliest is probably when I was just learning to walk,
Yeah.
and I would have been under a year, and I could actually tell my mother what she was wearing this particular day when I fell and hit my head on the door frame,
Oh, right.
and what the kitchen was like, and what was in there, what the colours were. And she said, "Oh yes," she said, "you are right." And I thought, "Well, yes, I know," because and actually the texture of how things felt on you.
Yeah.
Also, past life memories. I'm sure that's what they are, which a few people do tend to have.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's that very much. But I view it as a bonus, not
It's
not a problem.
fascinating that you have this different experience of the world that kind of ties you more strongly into your past in a way that it doesn't for other people.
And it's actually linked to autism and to dyslexia.
All right.
My brother is dyslexic, as are his 3 daughters.
Yeah.
I think mine managed to avoid anything. None of them have actually admitted to experience anything different, but perhaps they might,
Can it be hereditary?
Yes, it is.
Oh, right.
It is. It's yeah.
To my knowledge, I didn't know it had to be associated with. I'm used to the stigma. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure. I think I might be interested in knowing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's no.
I'd like to get that book.
Yes, yeah, do.
But yeah, that's fascinating, especially since you're a writer as well. That's a sort of powerful combination.
Yeah, well, it can be a very creative thing, and I think sometimes if I write poems, that are purely from that, then very often people will say, "Well, how did you think to put that with that?" I'll say, "Well, no, because that's that's just what's going on in my head, which isn't logical."
Yeah.
And I've actually had people argue with me as to what certain things would taste like, because to me, the word feather tastes of whipped cream.
All right.
And a man, when I was doing a talk once, said, no, it would be something much crunchier than that. Well, excuse me, but you're not actually in my head, so therefore, how would you know? Yeah, it's funny.
I notice a lot of your sort of writing advice seems to stem from, even like in the prompts for exercises, stems from things that you experience in your day-to-day life.
Yes.
So you're a big believer in that writing should sort of come from the person who's doing the writing, in terms of like, you posted a thing on Facebook recently, I think it was recently, a quote from Neil Gaiman saying,
Oh yes.
You are your own, you're the only person who can write with your voice.
Exactly.
Like,
yes. And actually you're your best raw material.
Yeah. So, you might have George R.R. Martin might be a million times better writer than myself, but I'm the only person with my voice.
Yeah.
So it's still worth having a go and all that. But So are you a big believer in taking things from your life and just drawing on that lived experience for even for the maddest of fiction?
Yeah, drawing on that, but I mean also going beyond that, because I think any place that you go will give you ideas.
Yeah.
You know, you've got the history. I think essentially human emotions probably haven't changed over time. You know, people still feel love, sorrow, anger, jealousy. Those things aren't really going to change, even if the trappings of society are slightly different.
Yeah, you still see little doodles on medieval manuscripts by children that are just like, I've just drawn a dog. Yeah. It's exactly what a child would do now. It's the same thing.
That's right. And I mean, I tend to write very much about strong women overcoming different things. So that can be true whatever century you set that in. You know, whether it's now, whether it's 200 years ago. I've got certain places that I'm very passionate about, Venice being one of them. And I think I feel a research trip coming on, because I need to go back there. I do love the place.
What is it about Venice that...
I don't know. A couple of people have asked me that, but I think it's just the whole atmosphere when I get there. And the canals and the gondolas and the sense of history and the buildings and the colours. And the food as well. I like Italian food. So it's an interesting one. I always advocate writing first drafts as quickly as you can.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because that trips up the little voice in your head that says, "Oh, that's a load of rubbish." You know, because if you're not careful, that will be sitting on your shoulder, and somebody will be saying, "Oh, you know, no, that's awful. Don't do that."
Definitely. I didn't finish my novel until I took part in NaNoWriMo, the National Novel
I do that every
Month.
year.
And it's brilliant. It's just such a great way to just force yourself through and try not to criticise too much.
No. In fact, don't criticise at all until the idea's had a chance to run round. You know, just give it breathing space.
Brewing.
No, that's a good one as well, or composting or whatever. But either way, it's enabling the idea to breathe. Because without that sort of breathing, it worries me slightly with a few friends of mine actually, where they're under contract to write so many novels a year, and they're given, say, a couple of months to do a whole, you know, novel, whole first draft of something. And I think that's very hard if you actually need time to step back a little bit, you know. Just having said that, though, this one, Apple Orchard, Lemon Grove, I actually wrote the bulk of in about 12 days.
Oh, really?
I wouldn't advocate it, but that was one I entered into a competition in 2018. And it was a competition organised by W.H. Smith, Mills and Boon, and Kobo, the e-reader. And they wanted a first chapter of 5,000 words, and then a very detailed outline. And they said they would publish the results at the end of, I think the closing date was something like the end of May, and the results were going to come in at the end of July, and they didn't. And in the meantime, I'd written the chapter and the outline and sent it off, and I was going to wait until November and rewrite the rest of the book. That was my plan for NaNoWriMo, you see. And then 18th of September that year, there was an email from a name I didn't recognise, and it said, "Congratulations on being shortlisted." And I thought, And I thought, I wonder what that was. And when I looked, it was this. And there was a really nasty little bit on the website, and it said there was a list of 10 of us who were shortlisted, and it said, if you are the winner, we want the full manuscript by the 1st of October.
Oh, okay.
So 18th of September. So I was slightly agitated that night. We were going out with my daughter and her partner for a curry, and I thought, no, I'm a bit tired, I'll have a look in the morning. I must have misread it. No, I hadn't. So I thought, well, I can't sit there and gibber for 12 days. I need to sort of do as much of it as I can. Thankfully, the outline was very detailed. I was writing 5, sometimes 6,000 words a day.
That's incredible.
I know it was. And I was doing yoga exercises for my hands, hand massages, shoulder massages, yoga exercises, and eye exercises. And all those sorts of things. And I wouldn't recommend it as a way of going on. They hadn't made their minds up by the 1st of October. And I actually finished it on the 4th. And the following day, they announced the winner. And it went to a lady who'd got 6 Sunday Times best-selling novels under her belt.
Yeah.
And I think that gave her another one. So it wasn't me. But either way, I thought, well, I'd got a novel out of it.
Yeah. That's what you were talking about earlier with writing with constraints.
Yeah. So, and by which time the publisher I was with then was saying, oh, have you got anything else? And I was thinking, thank goodness I have actually. So I was, have this one.
Yeah.
Quite strange, really, as it goes.
That's brilliant. I notice you obviously teach lots of workshops and that kind of thing, and I've seen you recommend things like writing retreats.
Yes.
Do you feel there's a lot of value in writers being around other writers?
Yes.
Because it can be quite a solitary thing by default often.
Yes, yeah. I'm very thankful for a couple of sort of small groups that I'm in. There's one that was formed when I was in the Romantic Novelists, just before my first book was published. So I'm still in touch with those 2 writers once a month, Linda Dunwell and Leslie Eames. And then I'm very lucky. I had a play shortlisted for further development last year, and that development is carrying on until next month. And in the course of that, I have 2 other lovely ladies, Fiona Black and Christine Aziz, who are giving some brilliant help, with different things that I'm sending them. So, and very much, if you feel despondent, I've got other writers like Michelle, Jo, and of course, Bob, other half, and several others that you can. And a friend I saw yesterday, Elizabeth Beacon, who was writing Mills and Boons, and is now casting off into the wide blue yonder, something exciting. So. So very lucky, with, but I think you make your own luck with the people that you meet up with.
It does make it a huge difference. I probably would never self-publish without supervision.
Yeah.
No, I get blamed for everything.
But I have made a lot of friends in the Romantic Novelists.
Yeah, that sounds brilliant.
Because I've got a critique partner, and I've just proofread her first book.
Yes.
Sue's edited.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Wendy's going to read it as well.
She's
bound to pick something up like this.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
It's brilliant as well when you have things like the Romantic Novelists Association, or I think there's the Crime Writers Association as well, isn't there?
Society of Authors are great as well.
We've got a writers group in the library,
Yeah.
which meet twice a month.
Oh, fantastic.
And we've just started, we were doing a critique meeting once a month where you'd submit something and then everybody comes with notes and that sort of thing. And we've just introduced workshop sessions as well, where I provide some writing exercises. I might pinch a couple from your book.
Yeah,
if you
yeah,
don't
please
mind.
do. Yeah, please do.
Yeah, it can be tricky sometimes to find, because people who want to write are such a diverse lot.
Yeah.
With different aspirations, it can be hard to find people who want to do the same thing as you. So we've got a very mixed group of people who, we've got one chap who's successfully self-publishing on Amazon. We've got someone who's writing screenplays.
Yeah.
We've got a couple of poets. We've got some retired people who just want to get out of the house and just have a go because it's fun and they're not fussed about publishing anything. Do you have any advice for sort of getting people to just give it a go? We have a lot of retired people who come in, or widowers who come in, and they're just looking for groups and just for somewhere to go and sit down and chat to people and maybe get a hobby out of it, kind of thing.
And I think that's the thing, that if you just think, give it a try, and if you are stuck for an idea, just start with I remember, and then just see what comes. I also tend to take in something natural, like some herb plants. So something like rosemary or mint, or something like that people can touch and smell.
Like you would do for an art class.
Yeah, very much. Yeah, very much
That's
so.
brilliant.
Or postcards. Something like. Yes.
I'll have to start doing that. I've not been doing that. I've just been sort of
anything sensory, or put some music on. And just.
I've got experience a copy of well of getting into why does this go with this. I've got things in boxes everywhere. Music's great because it's music. So I don't know that I could do with it.
Please do.
The thing is, if something doesn't gel with you, it's like
I can't listen to music. My niece puts something on in the background.
I think it's more a case of you put something on literally for about 2 minutes. So, and then listen
to it and then write your thoughts. That's a different.
No, it's just very much you put it on. And so, for instance, it might be something that you wouldn't necessarily listen to. But what did I put on? Oh, at one of my groups, fairly recently, I put on a track. I don't know if you remember it. Was it Velvet Underground Tube Station at Midnight or something?
Oh, the Jam.
Yeah, Jam.
Great
Jam. And that's the one. And somebody came up with a whole story, and they could see these people sort of having an argument on this platform, and it sort of fed into a chapter of what they were writing.
That's brilliant.
So anything like that, really.
Just anything that's not. It seems that things that are really helpful are things that aren't writing.
Yes. I would say that. Or one thing that somebody passed on to me that they did at somebody else's workshop was they were asked, find an object from your pocket or your bag and put it on the table in front of you. So they'd do that, and then they'd say, pass it to the person next to you.
Brilliant.
So you'd swap. And so you'd then have this object, and they'd say, what is it? And it could be something really quite peculiar. And then you wrote the story behind somebody else's object, and then you'd confer with the person and say, well, what is it really? And they would then write the true story about it. So you've kind of got a double whammy then with with the same thing. So I would say just have a go with something like that. And I think if you give somebody something as a starting point, or a first sentence, or but I think definitely something sensory, seems to fire off the best.
Oh, okay. Well, I haven't done any of that at all.
Yeah.
So that's definitely going to be
so
something
there
to
we
do.
go. And so, you know, you've got all 5. So it's the texture of maybe a piece of velvet, or, you know, whatever, or wood or stone, or
I love that so much of your writing practice is sort of grounded in the senses in that way.
Yeah.
You talk about in Writing Success how
Yeah.
even if you've just got 15 minutes to write, just find a way, a sensory way to get yourself in the zone, whether it's a piece of music that you put on, whether it's you light a candle that smells a particular way.
Yeah.
Which is brilliant.
Yeah. And it definitely gets you into something.
Yeah.
And also old photographs.
Oh, okay.
Because there was a novel by Carol Shields, Stone Diaries. And I know when I was doing a course with Birmingham University, we studied this book, and I think I'm right in saying Carol Shields had found this collection of old photos in a junk shop.
Yeah.
And she had then created a family tree from them.
Oh, brilliant.
And that is what the novel came from.
Yeah.
So
that's a great idea.
Yeah. So
let's look out for some research workshops.
Yeah. But you know, it's all good fun, really, and I think just encourage people to come along and have fun with it, really.
Yeah.
And if you're meeting up with like-minded people and talk about memories, I mean, you could go for something like your worst day at school or something like that.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So something that you didn't do very well with.
That's a thing I always sort of shy away from as someone who's not read much poetry and is quite reserved. I sort of shy away from personal things. So all of the exercises I've been giving people are just, you know, not really based in their own lives. It's, you know, write a scene with no dialogue tags where you can still tell who's who, that sort of thing. So they're all about the writing rather than about the person, and that seems like a much more interesting way to go.
Yeah.
To ask them to, you know, remember things and
I
about
think
their experiences.
I think that's the thing, because very often you can borrow a memory from someone else if you're creating a character, because the thing that makes characters more rounded is that if you've got a very flat character, it might be because they haven't actually got any memories.
Yeah.
So if you can slot in a memory of something that happened, that is why they're upset or uneasy at that point. Because, for instance, if they had been sent somewhere to the countryside to be with a great aunt that they couldn't stand, and that great aunt plastered everything in lavender.
Right.
If they then smell lavender in a different context, they might feel the same sense of uneasiness as when they were sort of shut in a cupboard or something by this aunt for being disobedient or something like that.
Yeah.
And the cupboard was full of lavender sachets.
Yes. So so they were surrounded by it, and they then feel really anxious.
It doesn't have to be your own experiences.
No, not at all.
Your own experiences colour the way you make connections.
Yeah.
And so you can use them to trigger things, but from your own observations of other people, it sort of comes out.
Yeah.
So you don't have, I mean, you will be in there somewhere, but it doesn't have to be obvious.
That's brilliant, because it sort of takes the pressure off a little bit, because I've always, you know, I didn't study English literature or anything outside of high school. So I sort of grew up with this idea of the author as the author, and just a person sat in a room inventing all the things, knowing all the things, and everything they know goes into the book, and then that's it. It's like a direct line into their head, and they've invented everything. But that's not the case at all.
No.
That's not how you sort of advise going about it, because it seems you're drawing on everything that's around you in different places and the people. It's a much more sort of humanist.
Dreams and everything can feed in, because I did an exercise. I read in a book somewhere that if you have a couple of sips of water before you go to sleep and you say to yourself, I will remember my dream, then you wake up and you do.
All right.
And so for a month, I experimented with writing these dreams down. I then decided I would turn each dream into a little story.
Yeah.
And I was doing that during the pandemic. And this is another book that I will be sorting out, because it then sort of became a writing exercise around around sleep and how to get a better night's sleep, and relaxation, and relaxing into stories and ideas and different things like that. But definitely say to people that you can borrow a memory from somebody else. So you could have them conferring and just say, what do you remember about somebody from your childhood? Who is the oldest person that you can ever remember meeting as a child?
Yeah.
That's quite a good one.
Yeah.
Because I can remember when I was about 7 meeting a lady who was 100.
Oh, really?
So, and all the things that she could remember.
Yeah.
So things like she remembered sort of the Crimean War and all those sorts of things. Of course, we've got another one now with Ukraine, but back then, everything that was going on, the fashions, and what life was like, and the fact that she'd never married, because she'd known a lot of her aunts or the women in her family had actually died as a result of having children.
Oh, okay.
And so it put her off totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So, anything like that really that might spark something.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's just going that bit deeper and creating, what does that person think about? What's their favourite food?
Yeah.
What wouldn't they want to eat? If they went into a cafe or a pub, what would they order?
Yeah.
And how are they perhaps around people? Do they mind being in a crowd, or would that panic them?
Oh, okay. And are they different by themselves? And that sort of thing?
Yeah. If they found themselves in a big crowd in a street, say, would that freak them out somehow?
Yeah.
What do they have a phobia about, like going up in lifts or anything like that?
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really helpful.
Yeah.
Before I let you go, because we've been here for a while now, sorry.
Yes.
Could I ask, do you have any advice on how to attack editing a novel? Just for my own sake.
Yes.
If nothing else.
I think.
And then we'll wrap up shortly.
Definitely, when you think you've finished, put it away for a while.
Yeah.
Then when you get it back out again, read it, resist any sort of temptation to fiddle with it.
Right.
If possible, print it off. Then read it aloud.
Yeah.
You will feel a complete twerp doing it. I usually do. I try and do this with plays when I'm writing, for dialogue, because if there's words that you stumble over or it sounds a bit clumsy, then you think, no, that's got to go.
Yeah.
But read it through once, put it away again, allow the ideas to digest, and then when you go back to it, repeat the same thing. If you hit a point where you think your attention's wandering, then put a little mark and just think, is that bit as good as it could be?
Oh, okay.
Go through, look at each scene, have a look where you might have put something in summary. So it means you could say something like, they had an argument.
Oh, rather than showing the argument. And
show the full argument.
The and
so it might be that if that scene could be pivotal pivotal to the plot, then that argument needs to be shown in full.
Yeah.
So what did they actually say?
Okay.
How did they look when they said it?
I've seen a theory, I can't remember who said it, but it was quite a hard line. You should never summarize your main character's words. You should always say them.
Yes,
which I thought was interesting.
I mean, there is, I think, scope for actually summarising sometimes. If it's just getting them from one place to another, then otherwise your book's going to be sort of
massive.
a bit like War and Peace, but I think on the whole, if you can actually say, put the key bits in full. So if there's any bits where you've done that, if there are any bits equally where you think, actually, I don't need all that description, or that bit isn't really adding anything, then you could sort of potentially take that out.
Okay, so you just sort of like draw in focus on particular bits. That
and go through, I usually sort of do that process with different colour pens.
Oh, okay.
So you can colour code your colours and just say, this bit needs adding to, this bit needs taking out, this bit needs tightening up a little bit, or I need a stronger ending to the chapter here. Make sure your endings are strong. And make sure that you've got a good start to the next chapter.
Just to keep hooking them.
Brilliant. And don't try and do the whole lot in one go. So
get the structure right.
Get the structure right first.
Structure,
Oh, okay.
There's no point editing something you then decide you don't.
No,
it's a great point.
It's true actually, because
wasted.
Sometimes you might decide that you don't need the whole first chapter. You can summarise part of it.
You've written yourself in.
It's
happened to me, and you think, actually, I don't need that bit. I've
No.
a couple of sentences in that
Yeah.
next bit, and that's covered.
I found that with mine at the moment, where I've got a chapter here and there where it's like they've had a little side quest, and it's like, why have they done that? There's like nothing changed by the end of that, so let's suck that off.
I think,
and you don't really see that until you've finished a thing. And
sometimes it's worth writing, because you can always highlight it. Because it's your subconscious working through the plot. So it might throw something up that you can use later.
Just cannibalise yourself.
In with a lot less words.
And also think about using those other bits as little flash fictions or something. And send them to a competition.
A lot of the advice I see is that if you want to sort of get readers to buy in, especially more for fantasy series and that sort of thing, if you want people to sign up to your newsletter, you need a little a reader magnet.
You do. You do. You do. And that's right.
A great idea to sort of use those and
and similarly, I mean, little poems or just tiny little scenes, that you perhaps are outtakes. You could actually make a short film of or something.
That would be great.
Which would be quite good fun.
Yeah.
But I think definitely don't sort of expect to do it all in one go. And very much make sure that something has changed by the end of it. So the character needs to change inside and externally by the end of the story. Also, something I found more recently, and it is true, each novel that you look in, when you get to the halfway point, there will be a point where a character looks in a mirror.
Oh, I've heard this.
Either real or imaginary. They're reappraising themselves and they realise things can't go on as they were.
And that's like the centre point for the story.
Yeah.
I love that idea. That's brilliant.
So, and there is a workbook. Who wrote it? James Stuart Bell, I think, comes to mind. But it's writing your novel from the middle.
Oh, okay, brilliant.
So you can sort of hit what you think might be the middle point.
Oh, so you just want
and
that
then go
first.
Backwards or forwards.
Brilliant.
There's loads of different ways to do it. You have to find what works for you.
Yeah.
I've got that book, but my brain's linear.
Yeah.
That's another one of the things that I was surprised the more I tried to write is the idea of the big author, where they just sit down and write it all start to finish is nonsense as well, because you just piecemeal it in and you can go back and fix things. So you're not reading the first draft when you read a book, you're reading probably the 20th and it's been edited and you know.
And sometimes if you're in the flow, you can just put a little note there, like for instance, the argument needs to be here. Just keep going with the ideas.
I do that because I spent a lot of years when I was young training for athletics. So I call it sort of doing laps. So I will start with a detailed outline of maybe 5,000 words, and then I will go around another lap and add more in. So by the time I've done maybe 3 laps, I'll have got to 20,000 words. I can then start breaking it into little sections, which may then become chapters.
Brilliant.
And then I start building more into the characters. So it's a very patchworky kind of way of working. It wouldn't suit a lot of people, but because of the way my brain is, it doesn't sort of trouble it at all, really.
I love that there are so many ways to do it, though, and it doesn't matter what way you do it, because at the end, the book is the book, and your book reads the same as the book by someone who will just sit there and do it all in one go. And
actually, I mean, allow first drafts to be messy. They're meant to be. Don't worry if it is a complete mess. You can tidy up and you can get rid of. All I would say is don't throw anything out until the book is actually published, because you might regret it and you'd be thinking, I can sign that to the rubbish bin. I need that. So
one of the most inspiring things I ever did was read the first draft of Star Wars, the screenplay for Star Wars. It's dreadful. It's so bad. Or whatever you might think of the final script of Star Wars. But the first one was appalling and all over the shop. And,
some people just write like that.
It
just depends how your brain works. Because I see it as a film. So I write it pretty linearly. I tend to miss some. Sue's always picking me up. No, you need the smells, or you need this. Or
it's my sort of fixation, but it's like.
But Sue brings out the sensory side.
Oh, brilliant.
But it's like very often, with any of it, you kind of think my first drafts are awful. And so sometimes if I've been in somebody else's workshop, they probably must sort of think, well, she's not much. But then for me, it will then springboard something else. So the first draft that I wrote of a short play that was actually performed at Number 8 a couple of weeks ago as part of a showcase that they did, took me about 5 different drafts and bore no resemblance to what I started with. So, and I think that's the thing, but without the first idea, which started off in the workshop, which seemed to be a goer at the time, but when I got home, I just thought, But then if I hadn't have written that in the first place, there'd have been nothing to work with.
Because I tend to write sort of scribbly notes that don't make a lot of sense. 2 or 3 pages of those, and then just pass straight into the stories, just to have your brain work.
It is.
And some books you end up writing slightly differently. The book seems to me it'll dictate. It depends what you're doing.
But I remember doing a workshop at Jane Austen's house several years ago. Oh, it was lovely. But there were 2 teachers there, and it was in the days when teachers had just been told that they'd got to teach creative writing for the new GCSEs, you see. And these 2 teachers were completely panic-stricken because they were, and one of them said to me, because we were talking about writing, and she said, I never realised, she said, we had an author into the school, and she said she brought her first draft of whatever book she'd written, And she said it was a complete mess. And I said, yes. and she said, well, she said, I thought what actually, was published was as it was written. I said, God, I wish. It was so much easier. But I said, no. I said, and she said, oh, well, do they all have to go through all this messing about that we're doing? I said, yes. So she said, oh, well, she said, it's a lot harder than I thought. She said, I thought it was more that you got that sort of brain. And it was. And she said, we're expecting the children to be absolutely perfect in what they put down. Yeah. And the thing is,
that might be inhibiting.
Yeah, and it probably is. And when you think with exams that you get so long to answer a question, and if you start off and you think, oh, I could have started that better, then often you haven't got the time to. You've got to press on as best you can, haven't you? Really. So it's all those factors really. Yeah. But no, tell anybody that turns up to your groups to just go for it. Yeah. Do bring the senses in, because I think it kind of wakes up memory. I can remember going to it was an elderly care complex, and some people did have memory problems, but we took in things like I can't remember, washing powder and some herbs and various other things that they probably would have generated memories, and they were talking about things that had happened sort of 80 odd years ago, and it was quite magical, really.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I'll have to give that a go. Does anybody have any questions at all before we wrap up? If not, don't worry. You can always chat afterwards.
Yes. Yeah.
There's nobody in the room afterwards, so feel free to hang about and have more tea and coffee and just have a chat if you like.
Yeah. No, it's great.
Thank you so much for coming in.
No, it's been great.
Been brilliant to chat to you.
It's been great, and just keep going with yours.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yes.
He's been at it for ages.
Yes.
He's got Joe's problem. He just can't let it go.
No. You have to. Yes. Yeah. No, I mean just be brave and keep going. Yeah. But competitions, definitely.
Yeah, I'll give that a go.
Yeah, definitely, because
much better, I feel. I've just got done one competition.
I did tell you. Yeah, I did tell you.
Amazingly better.
Yes.
Yes.
It's out in the world.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
No, I think you do, and actually, if you send out more, to more competitions, it stops you worrying about, is that going to be any good? Because I think when I upped the number of submissions I sent out, I worried far less about the outcome, because when it's one of lots of things.
Yeah, I read a book which is about, I can't remember what it was called. It was called something like Art and Fear or something like that. Where there was a class, a pottery class, and half the class were told, you just have to make one pot by the end of term. And it just has to be brilliant. And the other ones were told, right, you're judged on volume. You have to make as many pots as you can. And then inevitably the ones who were concentrating on volume ended up with the nicer pot at the end, compared to the ones who just focused on one.
I think so. And I mean, also you worry far less, because you think, well, I can do as many as I like.
Not so much invest.
And if you're just lobbing stuff out and just think it doesn't actually matter, I'm going to give it a try, because actually, I mean, you've got nothing to lose. And very often I've sent stuff that I've thought, well, I'm not entirely happy with that. And that will very often with poetry competitions, they want 4 poems. I can always find 3 that I'm happy with and 1 that I'm not. But you think, well, that will have to go in because it fits with the theme. And that will always be the one that they come up with. Oh yeah, we'd like that one. And yet, you kind of bypass it yourself, and you think it's a strange thing, really.
Right, we'll wrap up and thank you very much.
No, thank you.
That was brilliant. And you have books for sale?
Yes, I do.
Interested
They're
as well?
£5 each.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So
We get this one continued.
Oh, let me just.
Thanks for doing it, Martin.
yeah.
No, thanks so much for coming in. We really appreciate it. I'm trying to make the library a bit more literary, if that makes any
Yes,
sense, because
no.
we don't do a